So all along the Watchtower, Ron Moore says that music came from the creative ether.
Indeed
So are you responsible for that shit?
We're done here.
Hi, I'm here with Dr. Kevin Grazier, science advisor for Battlestar Galactica.
Yay.
And, well, first off, what are you a doctor in?
Planetary physics from UCLA.
UCLA being in Los Angeles, you previously told us an interesting story about how you got started with the whole science advisor gig.
Indeed, it actually started writing a script for Star Trek Voyager. A buddy of mine and I were unhappy with the direction of the first few seasons of Voyager. By the end, I thought it was a fantastic show, but the first few seasons, we weren't happy, so we decided to write a Voyager script.
Like many fans really want to do at that point.
Right, and the fact of the matter is Paramount, well, Star Trek in specific was one of the few shows that take unsolicited manuscripts. You can send in a script without an agent, and Paramount was pretty honest. They say, we get about $3,000 a year, we'll promise your script will get read, and you'll get it back. What we won't promise is a good outcome. They said a handful of people every year, 7 or 8, single digits, have any kind of good outcome. So we sent our script into Paramount knowing our odds. And they tell you you'll get it back within 8 weeks to 8 months. 7 months later, I get a call from the executive producer's assistant saying, she loved your story, goes in a direction we don't really want to go, which I should point out they did eventually, but they invited us to pitch stories. So we pitched several times, and to the people to whom I pitched, mostly, one was Michael Taylor, he wrote Razor, he's on our writing staff, and the other person was Brian Fuller, known for Pushing Daisies, Dead Like Me, Wonder Falls, etc. Also Heroes. He was a staff writer there. Brian, being a Trek alum, remained buddies with Ron Moore for years, and I remained in contact with Brian. So when Galactic came online, over sushi one day, Brian pitched me to Ron, said, hey, if you need a science advisor, I know this guy. And Ron said, yeah, okay. So they brought me into the office and talked for a few minutes, and Ron hands me the series Bible and the first 2 scripts, and I guess that means I'm hired. A couple days later, Richard Hatch is in Ron's office talking about being Tom Zarek. And I've been friends with Richard for years by now at this point as well, and as he's getting ready to leave, he said, oh, by the way, if you need a science advisor, I know this guy, and Ron says, oh, no, we're already talking to someone, and they were referring to the same person. Yeah, so it was a done deal.
Well, so that's interesting because Star Trek and Battlestar, people always like talk about how they're 2 radically different shows. And like one of the things with Battlestar as opposed to Star Trek is that the science is kind of more in the background.
Any description of your day today would talk about your technology, your cell phone, things that would be science fiction to somebody in 1960s, right? So any description of these people today involves the technology with which they have regular access, and they're in spacecraft. So we have to talk about the technology, but the story's about the people. And being technical advisor, I'll say up front, I'm fine with that. I don't, we never want for stuff to do. I never want for stuff to do, but it's not about the tech. It's about the people involved who are, the last vestiges of humanity. Star Trek, the technology. I know the tech advisor for Star Trek. It was Andre Bormanis, and he's got a very different job. The job on Star Trek is different than the job for me. I just have to describe the real-world science that would exist in their universe. And pretty much in our universe, if you can get beyond faster-than-light travel, artificial gravity, sound in space, then everything is, they listen to me, and everything is pretty well done, I believe.
How do you typically work with the writers in that regard, then?
Depends on the writer, depends on the episode. Some writers, some episodes aren't tech-heavy. Colonial Day. How do we get a gun through security? That's about all I did. And a couple episodes says there's no technology, there's no tech in it, so I don't do anything. Some, there's a small amount, I'll read the script, I'll make some notes, and send them back. A couple of the writers, in particular Bradley Thompson and David Weddle, who write everything together, they're a team, they will usually incorporate me from the beginning. Good example is Scattered. We were waiting for the green light on season 2. And we finally got the green light. I get a call at home from Bradley, and he says, hey, we finally got the green light. So, regarding the first couple episodes, and he proceeded to tell me what he wanted for Scattered. He says, okay, here's the situation we want. How do we get into it? How the hell do we get out of it? So in that case, the science is fundamental planning at the very basic level, but sometimes it's just filling in a tech word here and there. It completely depends on the story, it completely depends on the writers.
Now, another thing was as you just said, there was that some episodes have a fundamentally science, plot element to it, and particularly for me, looking at season 3, especially with the signs leading to Earth, that seemed to be a big deal.
In season 3, and this is a special case, this has only happened once, I actually went into a meeting with the writers over at Universal and did a PowerPoint presentation on what astronomical signs and signposts along the way might lead us to Earth. And I said these things would be good, pulsars, which we used, exploding stars, things, black holes, and I said these things would be bad. Like, we saw the constellations in Home, those are constellations as seen from Earth, but they'd be bad as signposts to get us there unless we're really in our end game. So I just set out, these would be good, look at these, avoid these, and then we went from there. But interestingly enough, afterwards I was talking to Bradley Thompson, and I was talking about stars, and I was saying how, on Earth it took 800 million years before we had our first single-celled life, blue-green algae, cyanobacteria. And I said, stars, only a little bigger than ours, only live for a million years or so, or a billion years, not a whole lot longer than it took life to form on Earth. So I speculated, I wonder how many times in the history of our galaxy we had life just pop up on a planet, we're here, boom, the sun explodes and wipes it out. Which kind of sounds like Rapture and Eye of Jupiter, doesn't it? So that was actually kind of worked. And I assume that the algae was an indigenous life form on that planet, and the trees were brought there by the 13th tribe. That's kind of what I assume in that.
So like have a follow-up podcast of your own where you're actually adding your own scientific advisors' observation of what was actually working and not working for them.
Actually, I do. I write. I write the tech blog. I write on cinemaspy.ca. There, I write. I've got about 9 of them out so far, where I discuss the science and technology in Galactica. So if you go to cinemaspy.ca or Canada, it's there.
And you actually also have a book out called The Science Behind Dune, or The Science of Dune?
I do have a book out called The Science of Dune, and it discusses the science of Dune. I wrote 2.5 chapters, edited the book, discussing things from could sandworms exist to how does FTL work. I wrote the FTL chapter simply because at conventions, every time someone asks me about how does FTL work in Galactica, and I've always maintained that as long as it could potentially be a plot point, I won't go into it, because I want the latitude to be able to change that. And so I wrote the FTL chapter in Dune just because of people always ask me at cons about Galactica's FTL. But yeah, it's fun. I don't know how it's doing yet. It hasn't been out very long, but it was a fun book to work on.
And that book again is?
That book is The Science of Dune by Ben Bella Books.
Available from Amazon.
Amazon.com, yes. Oh, by the way, and the follow-up, Science of Michael Crichton, is also out.
Seriously?
Seriously.
Wow, that's awesome, actually. One question I would have then regarding writers is, do you feel like you're training them in some ways, like they're actually getting better as these write these episodes?
Certainly, they actually, some of them will go out and do a lot of research now that they maybe wouldn't do before. I think there is an increased appreciation. Some, like I mentioned, Bradley and David, they are tech heavy from the word go, so they've always had appreciation of this. Some, I don't know if I would say training them, but obviously I've had the PowerPoint and showing them what to look for and whatnot. But over time, it's certainly they've remembered what we've discussed in the past, and they've incorporated that into future scripts. So yeah, in some respects. But I don't know, training them is a little extreme. But yeah, certainly they're learning the science as they go.
Oh, we're running out of tape. Okay, well, because we're running out of time here, I really have to put some pressure on you. Big question everyone wants to know is, who is the final Cylon?
Indeed, everyone does want to know that, and I'm far enough into season 4 where I know that, and I'm going to tell anybody because that's a big part of the mystique of the final season. Yes, I see that, and to ask me to tell you the final Cylon for a mere $200. This is big business we're talking about here, and the fate of the final Cylon, or the identity, is a large portion of our mystique and our audience, and you're asking me to compromise my professional and personal. Yeah, that's enough.
Holy frack!